So, been out today with the TRX-4 and the new G500, which was fantastic. A bit more of an update about that just here. This did great. This is the car out of the Climb Like a Spider video. Unfortunately, it got a little bit damaged, and I don't know if you've ever managed to crash a car heavy enough that you break a front link but also manage to tear your steering link off, but that happened today. But not to worry, the Climb Like a Spider series is about seeing how far we can push both the stock chassis and a comp chassis, and hopefully in a couple of days my Northwest Scaler Designs Scattergun chassis should turn up, and I should be able to bolt on these Intheworks RC pieces. So let's have a little look at these pieces and why I've chosen that particular combination. So from Intheworks RC, I bought the battery tray ESC stroke sliders, the low profile skid, but low profile in terms of raising the height of the belly and lowering the weight of the motor, but getting the transmission out the way of the rocks. There's a dual servo mount and a cross brace. So let's open them up and take a look at how they're doing. So these are all 3D printed. They feel like they're 3D printed out of quite a tough material. These pieces are specific to the chassis that I bought. And yeah, the print quality is pretty good. So being sort of modders and builders kind of kit, they're not finished as well as some of the places might do. They might sort of file down some of the printing and smooth it off and make it look a bit less 3D printed. I'm not too bothered. This is going to sit inside of a chassis of something that rolls 100-200 feet down rocky hills and gets beaten about, so looking perfect and scale isn't an issue here. This is more of a sort of comp crawler type setup. For me it's more of a sort of performance focused trail stroke rock crawler. I really like on this cross brace actually. First of all, it feels nice and solid. I'm not going to squeeze it too hard because I probably could snap a 3D printed part, but yeah, it's got a nice recess for the sort of where the diff is. So when that comes up, if you're running super low, it's got a nice little recess there. This actually, out of all the parts, is probably the piece that I may or may not use. I've got some standoffs here that were so cheap that I bought more than I needed. So actually I can kind of, the cross bracing that this gives me, I can use probably 5 standoffs instead to just have it out of metal, but then be able to space them out the way of where the diff's moving up and down. This is the dual servo mount for a TRX. Again, specific to the Scattergun chassis because it's a reasonably specific width. I think this actually is a bit wider than, yeah, it wouldn't fit into your chassis rails without starting to cut into it. And part of the problem with 3D printed parts is you never know if they're hollow or not, or what the internal structure is. It looks like they've used a sort of matrix layer, but if they have done anything to sort of lighten up the weight internally, there could be an issue there. The printing on the whole is pretty good. I can kind of see a few bits where they've either sort of just tried to sort of repair it or slightly file it down just to take off the rough edges. Yeah, again, these are builders these are aimed at people who are building their own chassis, so they were sort of cheap enough that I'm not bothered about the perceived quality of the print. But they look strong. They've done the holes nicely. Looks like there won't be any kind of snagging going in there. Definitely looks like the sort of thing where you have to put a nut on the other side. These ones are threaded. However, what I'll probably do with these, depending on how they bolt up, probably put a little bit of hot glue in there, just to sort of bind it in. You can't really use Loctite on plastic. It's not the best thing. This dual servo mount's nice. It's got a nice recess again for any sort of parts of the diff or anything that are coming up, while also giving you extra strength. I like that, and mounting the servo longitudinally rather than horizontally, if I've got that right, up and down the chassis, means that I can really play with where the servo horn is, and on the TRX, one of the challenges you have when you're trying to slam them is that the panhard bar and the servo horn kind of interfere with each other, and I think by mounting this in the right place, I should be able to have the servo in front of the panhard bar but not affect the steering too much, and that will really help. These are sliders. Now, there's generally nothing special about sliders, but we'll see if there's any magic here. They're actually, these are actually finished a lot better than some of the other pieces in terms of the sort of uniformity in how they look. But I think that's to get them to slide better, and they've done a really clever thing here of having sort of the standard side-to-side print, sort of like the herringbone print for strength, but they've also got these nice long strips, and as you run your finger over it, anything that's kind of grippy and sticky that would be the sort of 3D printed finish is actually underneath those long runs of plastic that actually make them feel like they really are more kind of sliders rather than just electronics holders. That said, I am going to use these as sliders. I'm not using them for holding the electronics, so they may get mounted in the standard way, but I might put them upside down to kind of have a completely flat underside. We'll see if I get any catching on this side. I can just flip them back over, although they do seem to be a specific bolt pattern, so hopefully I can try both ways. And this is the skid. This is a flat-bellied skid, and this has some interesting features on it, so I'm looking forward to seeing this. So it comes as two parts, comes with a new motor mount, and the only downside that I'm actually going to have with this is that this will be a open spur and pinion, and I'm not quite sure how well that's going to work yet, but I definitely will find out. On the standard TRX, the belly does stick out quite a bit, and what this skid is doing is sitting within the chassis rails, so everything that sticks out at the moment will be gone. So I believe you gain, they say about 1/2 to 1/4 of an inch, and that looks about right, which is brilliant because the chassis that I'm getting actually drops the chassis rail by I think 1/4 or 1/2 an inch, and by the time I've dropped the suspension I'll have the belly a lot lower, so running a standard TRX, especially with a stainless steel skid on it to try and not chew up the bottom too much, will be interesting. Again, the finish is very different on this. It's making me wonder if I've got these electronics trays the right way up, because the bottom of the skid has a really smooth finish to it, and the bit that I thought where I would mount my ESC actually has a really smooth finish to it as well, so maybe they kind of sit that way. I'll find out when I bolt it all up. this, yeah, this is good. This is really good. I haven't sort of looked into too much about how it sort of bolts together yet. It does look like it's going to sit in the chassis that way. Immediately I can see by putting this in, pretty much the link positions for the rear are exactly the same as what I've done for the Climb Like a Spider video. So it's raised the upper rear and raised the lower rears by around about the same as I did, by around 6 to 10 millimeters, and that really increases the sort of anti-dive, the anti-squat characteristics, which really keeps that back end up as you're climbing, which is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Does look like I lose the Traxxas clocked motor positions, so I'll have to set the mesh myself. That's not a difficult thing, but again, it's more of a kind of modders, builders kind of thing. And I'm going to guess that somehow, I'm not really sure how these bolt together, but this is where the motor will be. So I'm guessing that this piece actually mounts onto the top of the gearbox. So what I'm going to do is just pull the shell off quickly, and just see where this might actually catch. So yeah, the mount point to the gearbox. Yeah, so straight away, that's going to be holding the motor. The skid's going to be around about there. So there'll be some bolts on top of the gearbox that these hook onto, and in fact, it's going to be these bolts where I've got my, I think it's where I've got my battery tray. Yeah. And then this bolt is going to catch into the standard bolt that holds the top of the gearbox on. So it's actually going to offset the motor more to the left of the chassis, which actually means I'll be able to run my ESC a bit lower in the chassis, because the motor will move across, so then I can get the ESC a bit lower. It will have that open spur and pinion, so mucky, dusty things, yeah, we'll see how it copes in the UK. To be honest, if it's going to be somewhere that's completely full of mud, I'm probably going to be taking the other truck anyway. Yeah, all in all, really like the quality. Definitely aimed at people who sort of understand what 3D printing is and aren't expecting it to be the same as an injection moulded part. Yeah, I'm really impressed. They've already, looks like they've already put in some of the bolts for me, and so I'll need to find out how they got them in there. I think they must be grub screws, because there's no head on there. But yeah, it's interesting. So it'll give me the same kind of anti-squat that I've got, although on the chassis that I'm getting, I don't need to use these raised link mounts. I can actually mount into the link mounts in the chassis that will be higher, which makes me actually think, if I want a huge amount of anti-squat, I could modify this slightly and have my rear links attaching to these top bits. But given how much higher it's going to put my links on this lower one, I might look at having more link separation on the front, which means that I lose some anti-squat but gain a bit more articulation, and I can also keep the whole set of links flatter, which will really help with certain moves, certain twists. But yeah, I've got some links to fix and a few bits to sort out. On the final tumble, the plastic welding cracked again, but I will be, I would move to having an external brace here, but since I've got the new chassis coming on Monday, this is just going to go back on the shelf, and I am going to move on with the comp build. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button. I'd love to hear what you think about some of the changes that I'm making. Please subscribe to see more of this kind of thing, and if you have a TRX and you want to do some of the Climb Like a Spider mods, this flat skid does everything that you need for the back end, and then the front end is just making some links and chucking some stuff on. Thanks again.